Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fundamentals of Communication. Today's lecture is going to be on intrapersonal communication. This semester, we are going to discuss intrapersonal communication as well as interpersonal communication. Both of these are two of my favorite topics to discuss because they are incredibly important. If anyone does not know what intra or interpersonal communication is, then I am more than happy to go over that with you. So, intrapersonal communication is communication with yourself, and then interpersonal communication is communication with someone else. It is defined as at least one more person, usually 1, 2, or 3. But in order for there to actually be an interpersonal communication interaction, then the other person must talk back with you. So there has to be an ongoing communication of a successful conversation. Now, if the other person does not speak back to you, or if the message that either of you are trying to convey is not fully perceived or understood by the other person, then that does not qualify as effective communication. And in order for effective communication to occur, it has to be involvement from both parties. And in order for interpersonal communication to actually be put in place, then it does require effective communication. But we will talk about interpersonal communication a little more in depth next time. Today, I want to focus on intrapersonal communication. So, intrapersonal communication is communication with yourself. And you may think, well, I don't talk to myself. That sounds weird. Is it just like voices in my head? Am I walking around the house talking to myself? It's not exactly like that. So it sounds a little bit weird at first, but intrapersonal communication is the communication with yourself, how you problem solve, how you make decisions. If you are going to decide what to wear today, what kind of car you're going to buy. It is working through childhood trauma. It's all of the things that make up you and all of those things that go on through your intuition, the conversation amongst yourself that does not necessarily happen with other people. You could technically have the intrapersonal communication with yourself and then later have that same conversation with somebody else. But for that specific occurrence, then that is only what is happening with yourself. So the thing about intrapersonal communication is it goes back to authenticity. It is incredibly easy for us, especially with social media, all the things that are trending, all of the things that we see on a nonstop basis every single day. It is very difficult for us to get away from who we are as a person, the core of who we are. Whenever I am in the classroom, I like to show my students a collage. On this collage, I have different images. I have a Michael Kors bag, a Louis Vuitton bag, an iPhone, a Tesla, and I also have this doodle dog that's trending. The dog is super cute. I love animals, but how many of you know somebody that has this dog? I know so many people that have this dog. And like I said, I love animals, love dogs, and this dog is adorable, but the dog is trending. It seems as if it has just been a recent trend within the past couple of years. Or Brooks tennis shoes. I remember during my middle school years, all of the girls would wear flared pants. That went out of style for a little while, and then it went to boot cut, and then it went to straight-legged pants. Now the flared jeans are making a comeback. But when you think about all these things, there's so many things that are trending. But when you think about these trends, how many times have you ever saw something and you are like, no way, I would never wear that. I would never buy one of those. But then you keep seeing it. You open up Facebook and then you see somebody else have one. Oh no, not one of those again. Or you open up Instagram and you see 7 more. You go to the mall, you go to the store, and then you keep seeing it and then it's sticking in your head, right? That being said, how many times has there been something that is trending and then maybe you don't like it at first, but then it starts to grow on you and then you think, maybe that's not too bad. Maybe I'll try it and see what happens. And then before you know it, you've jumped on this trend just like everyone else. I should probably add Stanley cups to my list of trending items because those have certainly been trending lately. In the classroom, it seems the majority of my students have one. But out of nowhere, it just started trending. So we all at some point are going to like things that are trending, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But we can be easily provoked, easily convinced to jump on board with those trends, even if we don't really like something. Where intrapersonal communication is important is it comes into play because it means that it is just you. You are able to focus on those thoughts in your heads away from the rest of the world. It gives you an opportunity to actually disconnect and focus on the core of who you truly are as an individual. Whenever we are constantly exposed, it's always on. If you go to work or you talk to people on Instagram, you're scrolling through the channels, scrolling through Facebook, you're always seeing these things. Years ago, before social media existed, it was still challenging. We still had those same types of challenges, but now it's even more prominent because it's never off. In order to truly disconnect and focus on yourself, it has to require intentional effort. We have to be more intentional to focus on ourselves and disconnect away from society. Because what will happen is you can experience a loss of identity. If you are just if you're just a compilation of all of the things that you're absorbing, whether that's the trends you find on Instagram or the trends that you see at the mall, eventually you are going to experience a loss of self, a loss of identity, because you're just all of these random pieces, and the core of who you are and your personality, your likes, your dislikes, all of those things are hidden and buried beneath that. And sure, there may be some of those things that you really do like, but it is important to be able to differentiate between who you are as an individual and if you are just influenced from the impact of the media and the impact of society. That is why it is incredibly important to focus on yourself. When it comes to any type of communication and any type of public speaking, the core of who you are and the relationship that you build with yourself will be by far the most important relationship that you ever have in your entire life. It's kind of like a table. If you don't build your foundation and have a good relationship with who you are, speak confidently and nice to yourself, this will crumble. And if the relationship with yourself is not a strong foundation and it's falling apart and it's wobbly, how are you going to stack everything else on top of it? This is your intrapersonal communication. This is the communication with yourself. On top of it, you have business relationships, your career, sports, your gym life, your nutrition, your workout, all of these things. Your interactions with other people, you and the relationship with yourself and what you want to build has to be the solid foundation and the core of it. Otherwise, everything else is going to fall apart. Your romantic relationships, your friendships. Because if you cannot show up fully for yourself, if you're only showing up 10% for yourself, how are you going to show up for somebody else? You can't, at least not very well, because you can't pour from an empty cup. So that is extremely important. Now, that goes into how you communicate in all of your relationships. If you are struggling with knowing who you are, being confident of who you are as a person, and just struggling with confidence overall, you will not be able to show up and communicate confidently with other people. That is important with all types of communication and with public speaking. As you will see, as we move through the semester, all of this goes hand in hand. Everything is interconnected because from the intrapersonal communication to with all of your other interactions, it's all intertwined and it's all connected. The goal of being a great public speaker, or one of the goals, is to also be yourself. If there are 10 different people who are giving the exact same speech in a room, the exact same content, the exact same information, that does not mean all of those presentations will be quality. Your audience will connect with you as the speaker. It's not always just the content. The content is important because you want your content to add value to your audience. You want them to find a need for what you are talking about, because if they're listening to you and giving you their time, then it needs to have a purpose, right? But the thing is if you are not confident and you are not showing up and you don't have confidence in yourself as a speaker, how can they have confidence in you if you don't? Whenever you research a source, and it's, for example, an academic journal, you find that source to be credible because of the author. In a similar way, you as a speaker, if you have an audience before you, then they are trusting you as the speaker to be a credible source. They are trusting what you are going to say. And all of this does not happen overnight, so please, no pressure. It takes years of public speaking experience for people to be able to, master all of these skills. But what you will do is start off slow, working on yourself. That is one of the reasons why I asked you to create 15 goals, because that is important. That is part of the intrapersonal communication. Slowly working towards achieving those goals, slowly working towards being yourself. If someone was going to give a speech and they said, "What do you think I should do? What do you think I should say here? Do you think I should do this? Do you think I should do that?" If person A has an idea of how this speech should be, whereas if person B has an idea of how this speech should be, and they try to flip-flop, it's not going to work out well, because you have to be the best version of yourself, not the best version of someone else. If you are trying to show up as another person, that is straying away from your own authenticity. So that's why it's extremely important to be confident of who you are. I will post a video for you guys to watch that is extremely impactful, but it is by Warren Buffett. And one thing that he talks about in the video is how the unusual stands out. If you see the same presentation and it's just kind of boring and you're just like, this is okay, it doesn't grab your attention. You want something that's unique and exciting, and your personality is going to sell. So ultimately, your audience is going to connect with you as the individual, not with necessarily the content. I previously had my own business. Whenever I finished my master's was in communications with an emphasis in marketing. I started my own freelance marketing business for a little while after I finished my master's degree. And whenever I was going through that process, I was spending a significant amount of time reading a variety of different leadership books, entrepreneur, business books, things like that. And I had a large audience that was or large clients that was real estate agents. And one of the real estate agents, I remember, they had built their brand, and their brand was actually showing fitness videos, which that was interesting to me because fitness is totally irrelevant to real estate. Whenever I had my clients, I remember I had to do market research, so I knew, part of the competition, things like that. At the time, I'm sure it has changed now, but at the time, there were, I believe, 4,700 real estate agents just in the Knoxville area. If you're going to buy a house and here's a real estate agent, they can get the job done, no big deal, it doesn't matter who I pick. That is not true. Same thing with public speaking. You have to connect with the individual. So that person that was presenting fitness videos for the real estate, gave them an opportunity to connect with their audience because they had their brand. For me, actually I have on leopard right now, but I have a slight leopard obsession. I love anything leopard. I'm also a distance runner. People know me. I also always wear pearls, usually. Sometimes I wear other necklaces, but 9 times out of 10 I have on pearls. But those are distinct features that I love about me, and that I'm confident about. Like, I love leopard, I love pearls. I've been running for, I don't know, I've always been an athlete, but I've been running distance since 2012. But all of those things are things about me as an individual that are custom and specific to me. So you just have to think, and you may be in a position to where you know who you are. And if you are, that's great, but not everyone does, because it takes time, it takes effort, and we're also all growing and evolving. So kind of take that into consideration. There is a book. This is not required for the class, but if you want to research it outside of this, then I would definitely recommend it. But there is a book called The Tipping Point by Malcolm Gladwell. The tipping point is about a tipping point in society, and it could be the tipping point is what makes something be a trend. For example, I mentioned the flare pants are coming back in style, or I notice a lot of people have the Stanley Cup or on cloud shoes, or back in like the 70s, the Converse shoes were in style, and now they've made a comeback. What made something be a tipping point? Why is that trending? Whereas other things people wear, and then you never see other people wear it, and it does not become a trend. So the tipping point kind of puts into perspective what is the trend and how it becomes a trend. But you kind of have to work on yourself as a work in progress, and it is a lifelong journey. Once you make a decision to commit yourself to growth in all of those areas, self-development is a lifelong journey, because we are always growing, we are always evolving. One thing I do in the classroom, which I do have to adapt a little bit with it being a virtual session. But one thing I like to do in the classroom is I will have a pencil, just a number 2 pencil, and I will ask if anyone knows what the correlation is between themselves and the pencil. Whenever you think about it, a lot of people now use lead pencils or a pen, and they don't use a traditional number 2 pencil. But whenever I was growing up, whenever I was in middle school and high school, we always had the number 2 pencils. Sometimes people would have lead pencils, but some of the teachers would not allow them. But I remember the number 2 were the most common during the time I was in school. But I remember standing in line with the old pencil sharpener, and people would sharpen their pencil and then they'd get back to their desk. You'd have to stand in line forever because that's what everybody did. Electric pencil sharpeners did not exist during that time. But hopefully all of you have at least used a number 2 pencil at some point, but have you ever sharpened one and then the lead falls out after you start writing? You're like, oh my gosh, I have to do this all over again. Now I have to go sharpen my pencil. Or even if it doesn't fall out and you're writing and then it starts to get dull. After you've written so much, you have to sharpen it again. And we are much like this pencil because we have to keep sharpening our skills. Even if you have reached a level of comfort, that means it's time to grow again. And that is how we grow in our personal life, in leadership, in business. And sharpening those skills and constantly working on them and working on ourselves is ultimately going to help you show up in every other aspect of your life in a better way. So I encourage all of you to work to try to be the best versions of you, not what somebody else thinks you are or what society thinks you should be, but the best version of you as an individual. And the more that you can be confident in yourself and your true identity, then the more that is going to surface and shine and show up for you in all other aspects of your life. An image that I do show when I'm going over that example and that analogy of the pencil is I also like to show a picture of colored pencils. And the reason for that is because we're all different colors. There's billions and billions of people in the world, and society has created these quote unquote norms about how we're supposed to show up or what we're supposed to do. And none of that is right. We have to be ourselves. It is impossible for two people to have the exact personality. So I would encourage you to just work towards being the best version of you, not what everybody else is. But as far as experiencing identity loss, there's so many ways that could happen. And I did mention just being exposed to social media or to different marketing trends, the media, all of these things that try to show up and deter you, get you off track from your normal pace. But there's also other ways that you can experience a loss of identity, and then you just go into autopilot and you're still not showing up as yourself. But another way is people pleasing. You could not be very good at setting boundaries. If you really want to say no, maybe you struggle with saying no, that could happen. If you are a caregiver for somebody else, being a caregiver can be extremely difficult. And if you have to dedicate all of your time to somebody else, then it can be difficult to stay on track with your own goals and your own identity. And unfortunately, there are times when, that is necessary, that we have to do that. But if you can, take the time to still focus on yourself, even if it's just while you're driving down the road, or sit outside in a peaceful area, just quiet in nature, or journal. Journaling is also an excellent way to work through the knots in your head. I love to journal. I have a journal for everything. There is a lot of research that supports there is a pen to paper experience with how well the information sticks in your head. If you are just taking digital notes and typing on a computer, then that for some reason does not stick the way that it does with writing notes. So that's important. Or even just getting caught up in the motions of life, whether it's just we go on autopilot, go to work, go to school, come home, clean house, take care of the children, and we just go into these autopilot modes, and then it becomes difficult to even think about who we are and the core of who we are, and we're just going through the motions of life, doing chores, cleaning house, making your bed, going to the grocery store, all of these things, and then we become disconnected from who we are, disconnected from the core of who we are as a person. Different life experiences can also allow us to be disconnected from ourselves. So, the death of a loved one, or if you have to move, if your parents get divorced, there's all kinds of things that unfortunately will happen during the course of our lives that will kind of be a setback or set us off track. And there's all kinds of things that'll happen at different points in time for all of us, because life is heavy. And that's why it requires such intentional work to actually set time aside to spend time communicating with yourself, away from the world. No one else is with you. And for me, which I'm a runner, and I also lift weights and I do yoga. Those are kind of times whenever I run and go to the gym, those are times that I am able to disconnect from the rest of the world. I put my headphones in. I'm outside in nature, just at the gym. I'm in my own little world. And that's my time to kind of focus on my intrapersonal communication as well as journaling. But there's no right or wrong way. You just kind of have to think about you and your personality and create your own system. It's essentially about creating your own system and what works best for you. And like I said, there's no right or wrong way as long as, you're kind of practicing that. I would highly encourage you, especially if you like to journal or write, or even if you don't, you could just ask yourself these questions and spend time reflecting. But you can find lots of different journal prompts online. You could type in intrapersonal communication journal prompts, or even working through trauma. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like childhood trauma. Getting into a car accident is traumatic. Or even if, you had a sick dog and something happened to the animal. There's all kinds of things that create traumatic events in our lives, and we don't always fully process those things. So find journal prompts. So for example, what are your strengths? Think about what you do well with. A lot of people experience negative self-talk and they don't have a good relationship with themselves because they struggle with confidence. Try to shift that and make a list of all the things you do well. And instead of being negative and talking badly to yourself, talk to you like your own best friend. What are your strengths? What do you do well? What can you bring to the table in a business setting or in a relationship? Think about that. And then you also want to consider your weaknesses, because those are areas to improve, but they're opportunities. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's bad. We all have strengths and we all have different weaknesses, and they're all going to be different and customized to us. But you just have to know what you need to work on as an individual. And then you could also think about what your short-term goals are, your long-term goals. Who matters? Do you have a good support system? Do you have mentors in your life? Are there things that you're ashamed of? What do you do for fun? When was the last time you started a new hobby? Do you have a group of friends that you do fun activities with? Is there something that you've been considering trying that you've been procrastinating doing? Are there things you're worried about? What are your values? What do you believe in? What do you want to work for? Where do you want your life to be in the next 5 years, in the next year, in the next 3 years? Do you feel safe with the people that are in your life, or are there friends and people that shouldn't have a place in your life, but maybe you're just friends with them out of habit? There's so many things to think about, and that's just a few of them. But whenever you are in the cycle of just going through the motions of everyday life, we forget to think about these things. And if you are not showing up fully as yourself, then it's just easy to get stuck in the wrong job, get stuck in the wrong relationship. All of those things are extremely important. When it comes to the intrapersonal communication, you can practice thinking, vocal, or written forms of communication. Any of those are acceptable. It does not matter which one. The most important thing is just that you are self-aware and that you are aware of, what you need to work on and what you can do to improve. So hopefully that kind of helps and puts it into perspective and gives you guys something a little bit to think about. And I would encourage you to think about this as well as you're doing your reflective papers, as you're creating the 15 goals. But next time I want to continue and going from intrapersonal communication into interpersonal communication. So we'll talk about that. And then the very basic, it seems so basic, but it is not, because communication can be extremely complex. But there is a very basic model of the sender, the message, and the receiver. Sounds easy, right? Someone talks, there's a message, and then someone receives the message. But there's so much that goes on in between, because we've had so many different backgrounds, so many different experiences, so many walks of life. The way that this person tries to convey this message, they may think that it's coming out in their head a certain way, but this person perceives it in a totally different context. And that's how communication barriers happen. That's how there becomes a gap in communication. So until we talk about the interpersonal communication, I encourage you to spend some time reflecting on the intrapersonal communication. And please do not hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns or anything at all. But I would like to leave you with a quote today. I'm sorry if you get tired of hearing the quotes or seeing them. I may post them as well. There's a few on the syllabus, but I love quotes. I think they're extremely important. Only if you are doing the work. Reading them is not going to do you justice, but you actually have to read them and apply what they say. And that's part of the intrapersonal communication and the self-development. But the quote is, if you want something in your life that you have never done, then you are going to have to do something that you have never done. All right. Thank you everyone for listening, and I will talk to you soon about interpersonal communication. In the meantime, please let me know if you have any questions about intrapersonal communication. Hope everyone has a wonderful weekend. Thank you.